Hi, everybody. How are you doing? We've been sitting for a long time. Anybody need to stand up and stretch? No? You good? You can. Take a moment. Really appreciate the opportunity to be in the room with, well, it's just such an extraordinary room, truth be told. And I always regret my placement when I have to follow Jeff, who's just such an extraordinary speaker and shares really important information with us. I too would like to recognize that we're on the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, and to thank Wilson for his generous welcome to these territories. There's so much we could talk about. Oh, it's hard to just keep it to speaking notes, but one geographic positioning as Canada's gateway to the Asia-Pacific area. The Premier, the Minister for Jobs and Economic Growth, the Minister of Forestry, all recently traveled to India, where they strengthened trade ties and met with Indian technology companies, for example, to position BC as a global hub for innovation and technology. In fact, a delegation from Bangalore, India's high-tech hub, are planning to come to Web Summit Vancouver in 2026, and we're using Web Summit as a giant spotlight to shine on BC's tech and innovation sectors. This mission built on an earlier trip to Japan, Malaysia, and Korea last summer, where our delegation promoted British Columbia as a reliable trade partner that has what the world needs, from critical minerals to clean energy, to forestry, to agricultural products, and the ports to deliver them. Building these relationships is deeply important. And it's landed well. These partners have been clear. They are interested in doing more business with British Columbia. These are fast-growing economies where clean energy and critical minerals, are in high demand. We're ready to step up. BC Hydro's 2025 call for power received proposals for nearly 2 times more energy than it was targeting. Independent power producers throughout BC submitted 14 proposals, totaling more than 9,100 gigawatts hours per year, enough to power about 900,000 homes annually. That shows us that BC is ready to lead in the next wave of clean energy development. As Ottawa seeks to build new economic relationships, BC is extremely well positioned to take advantage. As you know, of the 10 projects identified as projects of national significance, 4 are right here at home. And that ties into what we're doing here at home to get those projects off the ground. Streamlining regulations and permitting. We've talked about it for a long time. We've all known it needs to be done. I hate giving President Trump any credit, but I have to agree with JF. It's given people a kick in the pants. Things that need to happen are happening. Doing this streamlining of permitting and regulations is part of our Ease of Doing Business initiative, which we launched last year and which is really starting to show results. As part of that initiative, we're expediting permitting timelines and leading in the removal of trade barriers and duplicative approvals for goods sold across the country. Our mining sector is already seeing these changes. Over the last year, we issued nearly 35% more exploration permits than in 2024. And since 2019, the coordinated environmental assessment and permitting processes have reduced timelines for major mines also by 35%. These aren't just numbers. These are real jobs. These are real revenues. And when we cut times, we reduce business expense. In 2024, our mining sector generated over $250 million in mineral tax revenue. That's important. BC has 1,000 mining and mineral exploration and development companies headquartered right here. And we're pleased to see, of course, the Anglo-America Tech Partnership, which will see Anglo-Tech headquartered right here in British Columbia. In BC, we can produce 22 of Canada's 34 critical minerals. Approximately 40,000 people work in good jobs in our mining industry, with 4,100 directly in exploration. The mining sector provides good jobs throughout our province. Last year, we saw a record-breaking $750 million invested into mineral exploration. At current numbers, projections are that by 2040, new and expanded critical mineral projects will represent an investment opportunity of $44 billion. It's extraordinary. And that's why we're so focused on this sector. I'll give you a specific example. The Mount Milligan copper gold mine expansion near Fort St. James was approved just last week. This expansion supports the existing 575 jobs and as much as $400 million in projected capital spending. This mine was approved quickly, thanks to our streamlined permitting process, removing duplication, but staying true to environmental assessment and our obligations to Indigenous right holders. Centerra Gold's CEO told us that this was a strong example of what can be accomplished when governments, First Nations, and industry work together in support of responsible resource development. It's a big success. We want to keep building on this, and we must keep building on this. Just this week, our government announced new fixed permitting timelines and additional funding to expedite approvals in the mining industry. Permitting timelines will now run between 40 and 140 days, period. And I'll share with you just an aside. Since I've moved into government from the private sector, there's been a lot of stuff I've seen that makes me crazy, but there's been some things I've seen that I really love. And what that looks like is when business and government work together to solve a problem, work closely, hand in glove. Doesn't happen as much as it should. We need it to happen more. But the examples I can share with you, I know Wendy's here from Life Sciences. Our life science strategy was developed in very close consultation with that sector who told us what they needed, and we've been working to deliver it, and we're seeing results and growth. And that's happening now in mining. And when industry and government get on the same page and work together to deliver, that's when we win. We need to keep doing it. We need to do it more. So while we continue to focus on economic growth, we also need to take a really serious look at the other side of the coin, government spending. And as you know, BC is in a difficult situation. We have built record-breaking amounts of infrastructure. We've built more than any other province in regards to schools and hospitals and transportation, and that's important. It's critically important. But we're facing really strong economic headwinds, and we have to look at a renewed approach. It is time to make difficult decisions to secure our future and protect critical services. As announced in Budget 2025, we began a multi-step process to adjust government spending to respond to the fiscal reality that we're facing. And this includes reducing operational costs, finding savings on contracting, hiring, travel, the low-hanging fruit. But we are also continuing with a hiring freeze in the public service, and we've got to go further. As you saw in the federal budget, Ottawa is keen to invest in major projects in infrastructure and expand trade, and we'll make sure that we're well positioned to take advantage of that funding. We're upping our game in Ottawa. But we've also launched very important reviews across the public sector, across the health authorities, post-secondary institutions, Crown corporations, and Clean BC. We are looking everywhere to find efficiencies so that we can reinvest money into the services and economic growth that people need, and so that we can bring our deficit down and manage our debt. But as we do this, we've got to stay focused on the inputs that we need to increase. For example, inputs on speeding up permitting, as I've mentioned, $241 million to train workers for the jobs of the future, doing things like the Patello Bridge and the additional Fraser River crossing, investing in policing and mental health care to make downtown safer for people and for businesses. And with every funding decision we make, the people of British Columbia are first and foremost on our mind. We're focused on building an economy that supports every person and every business in British Columbia. We're living in pretty uncertain times, which means it's more important than ever for us to all adapt and to future-proof BC's economy for whatever comes at us. We've got to rely on ourselves, our businesses, and our workers to create economic prosperity. The good news is we have an incredible province full of people with diverse backgrounds, with the skills and the knowledge that we can leverage to make sure that BC secures our collective future. Thank you.
So much, Minister, and I'll just remind folks that they can log on to Slido and they can submit questions or vote for questions. I think it might be.
Told me it was on. I just needed to turn it up. Test, test.
Does she need to? Does the minister need to turn the mic on? Or he's on? Okay. Well, hopefully it'll catch up in just a minute. Let's start with maybe a broad overview of where we're at in British Columbia. We are in a very tough position. We have slowing economic growth projected to be 1.2 to 1.4, 1.5% this year, annual GDP. We have population in decline. Tens of thousands of people left the province for other provinces and jurisdictions last year. We have productivity challenges. We have issues around the cost of doing business in this province. You know, the list goes on and on and on, and you are in a very tough position. You are delivering the BC budget on February 17th. What kind of financial levers are available to you as finance minister, given that you have gone from a $5 billion surplus a few years ago now to a $14 billion deficit, 12, I think at last count. So, you know, when I'm looking at the role that you're in, and you're in a tough spot, businesses is looking to you to say, we need some help. We need the cost of business to be lowered. We need ability for businesses to expand and grow. But what is actually available to you given the kind of fiscal situation that the province is in?
Yeah, well, I would say first that's a very good summary of why it's so important to bring the deficit down. When you have this level of deficit, it takes away your ability to respond in a crisis. It takes away your ability to be present when you need to be. And so there are many good reasons that we have to be deeply focused on deficit reduction, but you've just summarized one of them. It limits the amount of room you have to work within, and we have to solve for that. I'm going to be the least popular person in the province for a while. This is a tough budget, right? We're in serious times. This is a serious budget, and it's work that we have to do.
What is your thinking and the plan? One of the things that we talked about last year coming out of the budget was, what is the government's plan to return to a balanced budget? You know, I know you're not going to, I think, preempt yourself for the news that you would be providing on February 17th, but, you know, can you outline a plan or some estimates about what you think it's going to take for the province to get back there?
Well, I can tell you that one of the areas of focus is on government spending, as I mentioned in my speech. We have been aggressive in our capital plan. That's something I've had to look at. We've had a lot of growth within the public service and within the public sector. That's something I've had to look at. I'm very interested in a culture of measurement to guide decisions. That's work we're putting in place that's a little bit different than some of the work that's done in the past. And it's going to take a number of years to do this work, but we're getting started. It's deeply important, and I'm singularly focused on it.
I love what you say about measurement, because I think you know me well enough that I love proof points and data. And one of the very important pieces of policy that we have been advocating to you is around the return to the PST exemption on machinery equipment. This was removed from the budget in 2022. And the data clearly shows that the a PST on machinery and equipment adds about 5.5% costs. And it puts our marginal effective tax rate at about 25.6%. When you look at Alberta, and this is a bit of a nerdy tax question perhaps, but Alberta, where we're losing people and businesses, they're sitting at about 12%. So again, I'm not going to ask you to preempt any news that you're going to release in the budget, but I'm making another recommendation that this signals to businesses that we are open for business in British Columbia, and here's a way that you can invest back into your companies.
Yeah, there are some signals to business within this budget. I'm not going to preempt myself, as you've rightly identified, but there are also some challenges within this budget. So it's a mixed bag for sure. And I suppose my take is, if everyone in the province is mad at me, I've probably got it about right. So that's sort of what I expect. You know, what can I say? It's very... It's very deliberate work. I can tell you that I have personally gone over 1,800 recommendations that came forward from our ministries on areas where we can find efficiency. I've personally gone over those. I can tell you that the work that we're doing to review the crowns and look for efficiencies is ongoing. The work that we're doing in the healthcare system. I mean, look, healthcare is growing at 8% year over year. And you've seen the GDP projections. Like, how do you square that circle? Like, it's just, the work here is enormous. We have to do this over a number of years. And I do think The fact that British Columbia is such a hub for technology and innovation, and we can unlock many of those extraordinary, talented people and businesses to address some of these challenges is going to be one of the ways forward.
You know, when you look at the opportunities to increase revenue for government, interprovincial trade, and I will give kudos to British Columbia because it really was one of the provinces leading a lot of the work that was done on mutual recognition. And that was a big piece of work that we have been talking about for decades. However, there is still so much work to be done. And being able to remove those barriers would be 1.5, maybe 2 billion in government revenue. It would be significant. You know, what is the work now? Because it seems that the leadership on this file has to come from the provinces, not the federal government. And so what can BC do to get some of those other provinces over the line on the other pieces of interprovincial trade barriers that exist?
Well, it's really important to note that this is not past tense. This work is ongoing. It's happening right now. The last meeting in Yukon, BC, of course, is leading this table. Mm-hmm. And we did reach an agreement and a mutual agreement framework. We have found some good wins, but there are still areas that are excluded. For example, food, and I do hear from wine and beer from those folks that there's much more work to be done. It's a deeply complex file, but as you say, I mean, the prize at the end of it is fantastic. So we must continue this work. There's a lot of rubs. Every step forward where we find an area where we can move forward, there's a list of exclusions. And so my worry in this work is that we go from this extremely complicated, regimen into a new one that also becomes so complicated because there's so many exclusions. So,
and then nothing actually gets done.
And then businesses end up with, so many regulations that they become at an impasse again. So that's what I warn against when I'm included in these tables. And I'll share with you that at the table that I sit, of all the finance ministers and the federal finance minister, there's a deep hunger to get this moving because we're the people that think every moment of the day about our GDP and where our revenues are and what's going to happen in regards to our ability to make the investments that we need to make to support growth. So there's a lot of pressure on the folks who are doing this work, and we need them to go further.
One of the other emerging issues over the past year is becoming a big concern for business leaders across the province, and that is around land ownership and around title and rights. I know that much of this is going to be played out in the court system. The concern, I think there's many concerns that it is going to take many, many years for this to get some resolution, that there's an impact on reconciliation efforts that have actually been moving along fairly well in recent years, and the divisiveness that can cause. What can your government do to address some of the uncertainty that all of this is having on businesses' abilities to operate and expand, investors to put their dollars here in British Columbia?
Yeah, thank you for this question. It's probably one of the most important things, pieces of work in government right now. So I'll answer your question, what we can do, but first I just want to kind of frame it up. So UNDRIP was adopted by every member of the House because it provided us a framework with which to do the work we have to do. Reconciliation is not optional. The obligation to do this work existed before the adoption of UNDRIP, and it continues. What it provided to us was a workable framework, which we then put in place and got to work on. And there have been some incredible successes. And to be clear, this work must happen. To get rid of UNDRIP, to get rid of the framework, would only slow us down and reduce the tools that we have to use. So I don't see that as a viable or helpful solution.
But amendments to DRIPA is what the Premier is talking about.
Amendments, on the other hand, can help us. So when you adopt a piece of work from, in this case, United Nations, the intention of what that legislation is, why we adopted it, matters. And the intention was to allow government the framework to do this work. That's why we did it. We want to make that clearer for the courts. So there are two red lines that we've drawn. One, reconciliation is the job of governments to work with nations, to work with businesses. It's the job of government. And two, fee simple land is not part of the mix. Fee simple land should not be used as a pawn, and government will support that position as the day is long. As you know, we are fighting this court decision. We think it was wrong-minded. And, of course, we're going to make changes to UNDRIP to make it even clearer what the intention of that legislation is, why we brought it in. At the same time, the Premier has asked me to look at a regimen where we can ensure that we are providing the power of government as a backstop to those both individuals and companies that have been affected by the Cowichan decision. And so what that means is, if it were true that, say for example, Mr. and Mrs. Jones were not able to get a mortgage renewal because of uncertainty in regards to that decision, then we would work with the bank as a backstop. To be clear, that has not happened, but we will be there should such a thing unfold.
Have you framed out what that could look like as a cost to government?
Yes, and it's a very low-risk move for government. Of course, it would be a loan guarantee position, so only brought into play should a loan be reneged on. It's a very low risk also. We do believe that this will be solved both through the actions that we're taking in terms of tweaking DRIPA, but also, we think, through the court system.
I want to get to some questions on Slido as well, so maybe the team can bring that up. I think one of the risks is that it is going to take so long to get some certainty that in the coming months and years that it's going to impact investment, it's going to impact business decisions, and it's going to impact our economy.
Possibly, yes, but we also know that we have to move forward. We have to. And when you look at examples like, just 2 days ago, the Eskay Creek announcement with the Tahltan Nations, that's a very significant proof point. And there are many of them. Decisions are being made in corporate offices that partnering with Indigenous peoples for certainty is the direction to go. People know that this is true, this is the work that we need to do, and this is a distraction from that important work.
And the Board of Trade shares that view. Reconciliation is integral to prosperity for all. The concern is, what the process is going to look like over the many, many months and years ahead. We did speak about that question about balanced budget. Maybe the next question, because it talks about how you're trying to reduce costs on government side. And looking at the size of the public sector in British Columbia, it is a bit mind-boggling how it got to be so big. The federal government is actively talking about using AI. What kind, especially with your background in tech, what kind of AI tools are you looking at to maybe do the same approach here in British Columbia?
Yeah, I will share with you that I'm very bullish on AI. I know a lot of people have hesitation. To me, I see it as a very important tool that will help us with productivity, and I look for opportunity. I also see that there is some really lousy AI, and much adoption of AI is quite weak and superficial and creates more customer or, in this case, the people of BC rub. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in deeper solutions that can really help us. So it's happening in a number of different ways, but one of the ways is within the public service. The Deputy Minister to the Premier, Shannon Salter, is working to really address how AI can help us in terms of how it can be applied in a public service perspective, how it can improve the interface of the public with government. So that's being tackled from that perspective. We also look at AI in terms of what it means as a sector and a sector of growth, and within our tech sector and innovation sector. So those two pieces are really important, and we have a Minister of State working on the AI file. But I think one of the most important pieces is AI adoption for small and medium-sized businesses, and that's a place where government can help as well, because it really is, in my view, going to help us with our productivity challenge.
And it was quite alarming, the report that we did last year. 73% of Canadian small and medium enterprises had not adopted AI. It's probably changed a little bit in the last several months, but it's still a big gap. We are almost out of time. And you can read the questions as well as I do and sense the frustration about a number of things. I think, where we are in the economy, I would say frustration that we haven't seen more results from government in a number of policy areas. And so as you go forward and you are ready to deliver the budget on February 17th, Are you understanding the level of frustration from the business community, and are you able to act with urgency and to have those results come to fruition fairly quickly so that the business community can see that the policy is changing and allowing more economic growth?
Absolutely. One of the both privileges and curses of my job is that I get to hear from everyone, and there's many, many good things that I hear. I hear many good suggestions. I hear people's frustration. I also hear about wins, and I know some of the work that we're doing is having impact. I know some of the things in the budget is going to have positive impact as well. The business community is one of many communities that are facing really deep challenges here in British Columbia. The affordability issue remains very, very top of mind to people and is an area that we also have to address. So there are many competing challenges, and in this budget, I do my best to balance them. And as I say, it's a serious budget for serious times.
And I would say that there needs to be a better understanding of why economic growth is important. If we were to achieve 3% annual GDP growth by 2030, that's $400 billion in government revenues for things like health and education. So that is a role that government can do better in, is connecting the dots of the importance of economic growth, which helps with all the other social services you're speaking about. And so I will leave you with this one thought as you're going into a difficult time with the budget, is have that framework in mind that without economic growth, we're not going to have the rest and other communities get left behind.
Well, I can tell you that is kind of my mantra, and my colleagues are pretty tired of hearing it from me, but it is profoundly true, and there's no other way forward. One cannot distribute wealth if there isn't any wealth, right? And I remind my colleagues of that quite regularly. Another thing I want to, I try to frame up for people is when we look at the level of interest that we're carrying in the province right now, it's the fourth largest ministry. How is it in alignment for British Columbians that payments to, I'm going to say bankers in New York, but you pick it, is more important than the fifth largest ministry? And that will increase over time. We cannot allow that to continue. We cannot. We can do better things with our dollars. We must do better things with our dollars. And it's my job in this government to make sure that we do.
We will pick up this conversation in Victoria on February 17th. Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bridget.
Thank you.